Awesome. Okay. Sweet. So I have it started recording. And so welcome to the first ever LGBTQ Pride panel. These wonderful people are from Eagle County, and we are so excited to have them. We're so excited for everyone to share their stories, educate on LGBTQ. And this is something we continue and hope to have forever from now on. But so we're going to go around and do some introductions. We're going to have Mel start.
All right, I'm Mel. I'm 18. I almost said 17. My birthday was a few days ago. I've lived here since I was 10, I think. And my pronouns, most people use she, her. I don't really care. Anything's fine. And I identify as queer.
Awesome. Thank you. Orlando, would you go next?
Yes, of course. Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Orlando Ortiz. I am 37 years old. I've been here for the last 16 years. My pronouns, he, him, and I am gay.
Awesome. Jonathan?
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I grew up in the Valley and spent the last 14 years in New York City, and I've been back for like a year-ish now. I'm a gay man at 33 years old.
Wonderful. Okay, McKenna, you're up next.
Hey, I'm McKenna. I am 28. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as queer. And I basically grew up here. I moved here when I was like 3, went away to college, and moved back about 4 years ago.
Thank you. Allie.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm 23. My pronouns are she, her, and I was born and raised here, went to college, came back a couple years ago, and I'm living here now with my parents.
Thank you. Brittany.
Hi, my name is Brittany Rose. I am a 36-year-old transgender woman. I have lived in the Valley now for 3 years. Yeah, my pronouns are she and her. I mean, I thought that was obvious, but okay.
Awesome. And Alex? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I just realized that. I have lived in Colorado for, I think, 5 years. Moved here from Oklahoma. I'm transgender male, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm 13.
Awesome. Thank you. And my name is Madison Partridge. I am actually new to Eagle County. I moved here in December. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I identify as pansexual. So now we got an introduction of everybody, and we're going to go a little bit into everyone's stories, and then followed by a Q&A. So if you do have any questions during this, please use the chat to ask your questions, and we'll address those later. So my story is, when I was in middle school, I definitely had a feeling that I was not interested in men. And one thing everyone needs to know about your journey is that it's not linear. You don't just wake up one day and or some people do. That's the thing. That's the great part about the LGBTQ spectrum, is everyone's journey is different. I continued to stay in the closet until I was actually a junior in college, even though I knew when I was in middle school. And it can be hard, especially when your parents aren't understanding. And I do have to let parents know that it's okay that you don't understand, but what you have to do is you have to try. You have to try and understand your child and understand their feelings. And my parents did. My parents eventually, once I came out to them, it took some time, but they understood. And that, I cannot tell you how awesome it was to finally have like full acceptance. And when they were unsure, it was really hard for me, because there was a piece of me missing because my parents weren't giving that full support that I needed. And when they did, it was a relief off my shoulders. So that's something that I encourage parents. If you have a child, you might not know their sexuality. Just try and understand. Ask questions as much as you can. Do research. YouTube is amazing. It has so many excellent resources. YouTube, Facebook. Find friends that children are part of the LGBTQ community. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them how you can support your child. And one of the great things about YouTube is it helps you through your journey. I actually came out as pansexual pretty recently because I found out that I don't have a gender, or I like gender binary people. Like, it doesn't matter to me what the gender is. It's about the person. And that was an amazing journey to figure out about myself. And shout out to YouTube, shout out to supportive people in the community. So yeah, so that's a little bit about my journey. And we'll move on to Orlando here.
Hey guys, so I'll tell a little bit about my experience growing up gay. I grew up in the border cities of El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. Primarily Hispanic community. So that had its challenges on its own. Mexican culture is very machismo, which basically, means like a traditional masculinity way of expressing yourself, physical strength, dominance over woman, that kind of thing. Obviously, I am none of those. So that had its challenges growing up in a Hispanic community, as well as a Catholic household. My family's Catholic. I went to Catholic schools all of my life, from kindergarten all the way up to college, believe it or not. And so just the thought of coming out to my parents was just impossible with all these things going on. Later in life, I was very surprised how well they took it, and how I was accepted. Everything was in my head growing up. It's this big hurdle that I was going through. But around middle school is when I started experiencing bullying. It was probably one of the hardest times. No friends. I was very lonely. I had bad thoughts of hurting myself, hurting others. Now that I look back at that time, I know that it made me a stronger person, going through those hard times. Things changed a little bit in high school. I went to an all-male Catholic high school. So that's when I first began to have my first gay friends. So I began to experience, my sexuality and accepting it and feeling more comfortable with it, even though, if you can imagine, just an all-guys school. I mean, bullying was still going on, right? But it did get better. And then after that, I went on to college to Worcester, Massachusetts. Kind of wanted to get away from everything. And then I soon realized that I was the only openly gay student walking around campus, the only Hispanic student as well. So that was another challenge that I had to work with. But I realized that I couldn't go like that for 4 years, being lonely and feeling bad for myself. So I decided to do something about it. I started a club called Allies at the college. For LGBTQ community, I was the only openly gay member and its president, but I made friends, and that helped a lot, during those 4 years. And as soon as I finished college, I came to Colorado. That's where my family have moved to from Texas. And I've been here, like I said, for 16 years. Earlier this year, I am proud to say that I formed part of a FLTI, Family Leadership Training Institute. And it's just been amazing because I've always wanted to do something, be involved in my community, help others. And this community leadership course is preparing us to solve community challenges. And my community project that I picked was LGBTQ community group. So that's something that I've been working on, and it's really exciting to see what's happening in the Valley. Just last Saturday, we had our very first Eagle County Pride in the Park. Thank you, Brittany, for taking the lead on that. That was amazing. And now we're doing this amazing panel. Thank you, everyone at Mountain Youth, for doing this. So it's just exciting to see what's happening. And I just, urge, you to get involved. That's kind of what helped me get through those hard times. It's up to each of us to make a difference in our personal journey and to helping others as well, to make the next generation better. So support your LGBTQ members, organizations, reach out to them, get to know them, exercise your right to vote, vote for pro-equality candidates. And so yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Orlando, so much. That was awesome. Mel, you are next.
Oh boy. Okay. So I'm Mel. Like I said, I identify as queer. And I would like to use my time to talk about how to support. I feel like there might be some parents on this chat. I know my mom's on this chat. That maybe want to support their kid that is queer, or maybe want to support a kid that possibly is queer. And my story kind of ties into that a little bit. So that's what I'd like to use my time to do. I think the first thing is don't assume. Stop forcing heterosexuality on kids. That's when you see little babies, a boy's playing with a girl and they're like, oh my god, they're dating. Stop that. Stop. Because then the kids grow, not as babies necessarily, but as younger children, kids internalize that, and they're like, oh, it kind of solidifies the assumption that everyone's straight by default, which should not be the assumption. It makes it much harder to come out that way. And so yes, don't assume your kid's straight. Don't assume your kid is cis. Don't do it. Just keep an open mind. And then my second thing is I feel like a lot of parents, or in general, especially when younger people come out, there's a lot of oh, well, it might just be a phase. And my response is, well, what if it is? You should still support your kid. When I was, I think I was a sophomore, I was like, oh shoot, I might not be a girl. I don't know what my gender identity is. And I cut my hair. I started wearing more masculine clothes, and things like that are completely reversible. Hair grows back. You can return or sell or donate clothes. And I feel much more feminine than I did at that time, but the ability that my parents gave me to do things that made me feel more comfortable, like cutting my hair and wearing masculine clothes, really made me feel better and made me know that no matter how identified, I was supported. And if you, and I don't want to this to just be me going, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. But I feel like it's important to say that if parents don't support their kids during something that's a phase, it's either your two options that you end up with are your now queer kid doesn't want to talk to you, doesn't want to share things with you, maybe not completely doesn't want to talk to you, but is more hesitant to share things with you, or your straight kid is now I don't know about that, still less hesitant to share things. So I think supporting is so important. Just knowing hey, I support you even if I don't understand. Who is it? Madison, I think you said even if you don't understand, try to understand, or maybe just be I don't understand, but what can I do to make you feel more comfortable? Because I said, a lot of it's reversible, and figuring out your identity is so hard. Sometimes it's easy, but some people, for me, it's been so hard. I've gone through 3 or 4 labels. At this point, I don't even know. It's so hard to figure things out. So sometimes patience is just important, especially with like kids. Like there's just figuring out life as a kid is so hard anyways, and then you throw gender and sexuality confusion into there and you're like, I don't know. And yeah, ask questions. How can I support you? What would make you feel better? I think just support is the most important thing you can give a child that might be questioning their gender identity or sexuality. And I'm so thankful to my mom and my dad, but my mom's on this chat, so I'm calling her out especially, for giving me support when I was questioning. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, all the things you said, Mel. Raise your hand, panelists, if something that Mel said has happened to you or your parents, or yeah. See, it's a process, and that's the one thing that parents need to understand is it's a process, and it's a process for you too to just try to understand. You're not gonna just snap your fingers and like, yep, I understand. No, it takes time, and it's all about trying, and it's all about showing that love. Thank you, Mel, for that. That was wonderful. Sorry, I'm just super excited about this panel. I love it. Okay, Brittany, you are up next.
Okay, awesome. Mel, I'm going to take the follow you through and I'm going to pick it up right where you left off because you kind of gave me an idea while you were talking and I kind of disappeared for a minute and I wrote a little bit of notes for myself. And so like, I want to kind of make the theme of what I want to talk about similar to what you talked about. You were speaking to the parents. I'm going to speak to the kids themselves, you know, because as an adult, I can tell you my journey was extremely confusing and it had so many twists and turns, and I'm going to tell you about it in a second. But the theme really of what I want to talk about is your journey is going to be confusing, but feel free to experiment throughout that. Don't be afraid of your experimentation because you only learn more about yourself through experimenting. And basically, I can say that as a transgender woman, I didn't come out until I was 30 years old, but I knew from the time I was 5, 6, 7, like people question Jazz Jennings all the time. And I go, I don't question that at all. I just was too scared to tell people. So she's got bigger guts than I do is the way I think about it. So I can go back to hundreds of memories. You know, in 3rd grade, I vividly remember having an argument with a girl who told me I couldn't jump rope because that's a girl activity. And I said, I'm a better girl than you are. And then I took off into the swings. But it's just like, it was always there in the back of my mind. But I was raised by a soldier who was a drill sergeant. I was raised by a mom, a very Southern Baptist mom who, you know, took me to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Tuesday. Who goes to church on Tuesday? But we went to church on Tuesdays for some reason. And then when I got to high school, I really started to be able to experiment a little bit with myself. However, I still had to really stay within a certain boundary. You know, I knew that my sexuality was very fluctuating. I don't actually identify with any sexuality. I consider my own sexuality to be more of a free love sexuality. And that sounds inappropriate, but it's more like I find it's more of a pansexual type thing. But it's just slightly different in that, you know, I don't really have boundaries, I guess, in you know, who I love. So, as I went through high school, I was a varsity wrestler. I won 2 state championships and stuff like that. So I was a really good boy, but deep down, I hated having to wrestle. I wanted to play on the volleyball team. I wanted to be a cheerleader, but those are things I couldn't do. So in order to express myself in high school, I, you know, did powder puff cheerleading. I cross-dressed with friends, you know, on the weekends. As I learned terms, I started to define myself differently. So it wasn't until I was like a sophomore, junior in high school that I heard the term cross-dresser. And I said, well, I guess that's me. I identify, that's me because I like to dress like a girl. That's obviously what I am because I hadn't learned what transgender was yet. A lot of the youth today are very, you know, they got a big benefit in that they've learned so much about it to this point. So, you know, I never came out as anything but bisexual in high school. And I had to jump back in the closet. And then I moved to New York City, and that's where I really just kind of like experimented. I learned about transgenderism. I learned what these things were, but I also had to remember I have a family and a soldier and a parents that were never going to be accepting of this. So even though I was learning and knowing that this was who I was, I lived this secondary life separate from what my family was doing. So when I moved to Vegas and I was working as a female impersonator in a show called Lacage on the Strip, you know, a pretty big time job, you know, in a performance business, but I couldn't tell my parents about it at all. So my parents thought that I worked at TGI Fridays as a server, and I just got really good tips. But like that's because I was too scared to tell them of, you know, this is something I enjoy, this is something I feel more comfortable doing. And it wasn't until 5 years later after Vegas that I just kind of got fed up, you know, at 30, and I said, this is something I want to do. So, you know, as far as your journey, it's constantly going to be changing and adapting because you're always learning more things about yourself. I still learn things about myself today, you know, having been on hormones for 6 years now. Like there's constantly things changing in my body, and so like I'm learning all new things all the time. So just be comfortable with your journey and don't be afraid to experiment. And that's the brunt of my time, and I probably went over because I have that tendency to do that. Sorry.
No, you are good. The more the merrier. We all have such amazing things that we can educate the community on. So go over, panelists, if you want. Yes. Well, next is Ali.
Hello. So today I wanted to, talk to you guys all about what it's like to be queer in science. For me, my personal journey with my own sexual identity is very much tied to my professional journey and kind of how those two interact. And so, I've always loved science. They were my favorite classes from elementary school all the way up through high school. I always did well in those classes. So it made sense that when I went to college, I was going to study science. And I ended up picking neuroscience and psychology. I just think the brain is so awesome. I love learning about how people work. And so I wanted to, really dig into that and get down to the nitty gritty of how that works. And it's actually really interesting. I didn't figure out that I was queer or gay. I use both of those labels interchangeably until after I graduated college, actually. And kind of looking back, on my college experience, I realized that there wasn't any there weren't any mentors, any professors, any of my fellow scientists that were openly queer. And so when I made that realization, it kind of hit me and made me question whether or not there was a space for people like me to be, the scientists at the top of their field and also be like openly and proudly queer. So I started, put my science hat back on and searched the internet for some information, read some articles, scrolled on Instagram, and I found this awesome account called 500 Queer Scientists. And what they do is they take profiles of people in every science field to, math, astronomy, psychology, neuroscience, and of all sexual and gender identities. And they give kind of like what we're doing, like a background of who they are and who they are in their field. And what really hit me was that a lot of these people had PhDs or they were actively pursuing them at that time. And, getting a PhD is my end goal. I would love to do that. And it was cool to see that there are people, in fact, in the world, in the scientific community, who are queer, who are at the top of their fields. And I actually read an article on, it's called them.us is the website. They also have an Instagram, totally awesome. They do news, queer news around the world. They do awesome articles, op-eds, that kind of thing. And I read one about 3 queer scientists who are working on encouraging queer people to get into the STEM fields and, keep going on into the higher degrees. And there was a quote in there that really resonated with me about teamwork in science and how these discoveries that we make aren't just a single person, they're these teams that work together. And in fact, diversity, sexual diversity, gender diversity, all kinds of diversity are good for science and are beneficial for the field as a whole, because if there are multiple different points of view in a team, they're more likely to solve the problem that they're working on. And I thought that was so awesome. It's like, not only is there space for you, like, we need you. And so moving forward, like I said, I definitely want to get a PhD, and I plan to do that in the next couple of years. And as I'm doing that, I definitely I'm going to make a conscious effort to be open and be out, so that I can show that there is a space for queer people in higher education. It would have been super beneficial for me as I was, getting my undergrad degree, to see that. That would have been really awesome to, walk into a classroom and see a queer professor teaching microbiology. That would have been sick. And I totally believe that science is for everyone, no matter what they look like, who they love, or how they identify. So that in my career, like I said, I want to be totally open and encouraging for that, so that hopefully someone who's in high school or who's in undergrad can say, like, hey, I can do that. She looks like me, she's like me, she loves like me, and she's doing it too. So.
Yes, visibility is so important. I mean, I think all of us can remember the first time we saw someone who was like us, and we're like, oh my God, they're doing things. Like, yes, yes, visibility is so important. Okay, so next on our list, Alex.
Oops, I had to unmute myself. Well, I left my thing in there. I'm kind of nervous. Sorry. I kind of always knew, but tried to push it down, like how I felt and all of that, because I thought I wasn't okay and that there was something wrong with me growing up. Until I saw this girl on YouTube do a video talking about her story and talking about what transgender meant and how she felt, and just basically, just like her story. And I realized that I wasn't alone, and that who I was a real thing, and it wasn't some sort of made up thing in the back of my brain that just was there. And I think that made me realize that I had a place in this world that wasn't gonna be like I was trapped all the time, and that there was a way out. It would just take me some time to figure out that way out. And even after seeing that, I was really nervous. I tried to still cover it up. I wore dresses, not saying that like guys or people who use they them pronouns or gender fluid can't wear dresses. I just tried to cover up how I was feeling by doing that, because that's kind of what I was told, like growing up. Not like I wasn't told that, it was just how society put that in my brain. It was dresses are for girls and these are for guys, and that's just the way it is. So I tried to bury myself in all of that, which I guess I wish I kind of didn't have, but I also am glad I did, because it helped me find myself out, and it helped me, I think, be a little bit easier to understand why I think my parents would have taken a little bit longer to wrap their head around this. They are pretty supportive, but they still don't understand everything, and that's okay, because even parents take time to understand, and my parents are taking time to understand, and I'm still trying to understand it, because I'm 13, so I still have a lot of life left to live. So yeah, I think it's important that kids who are younger than me, or the same age as me, or older than me, need to know that the journey isn't over, it's still going. So it's okay to let yourself experience things, and it's okay if what you think you feel the first time you come out or anything like that. It doesn't always mean who that's permanently attached to you. Like, I came out as non-binary, and that was just on the way of me coming out as trans. And I think that it's important that people know that it's okay to come out as different things along the way, and that finding yourself is just a big part of life. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, it really is. And it reminds me of the rainbow. And that's why, to me, the rainbow is so important in the LGBTQ community, because our journeys are not linear. They're a nice big rainbow. We have a lot of rain with it. You know, it's a journey. And that is awesome, Alex. And you are being visible to kids around you, and you're showing them that it's okay, and you're going to figure out yourself. And it's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Alex. Okay, next we have Jonathan.
Unmuted. Hi, I'm Jonathan. I grew up in the Valley. I moved here when I was 4. And I went kindergarten through high school here. Definitely had my fair share of bullying as well. But I definitely agree that it made me stronger and more steadfast in my beliefs, and my belief that I should be able to do whatever I want as long as it's making me happy and not harming anyone else. My sexuality is also very tied to my career, because I'm a dancer. I'm a performer, choreographer, teacher. And it's really just being around the gay community and the arts have been so influential the whole time. It's just like, again, learning, the more information I got, I was learning about just the history of gay culture, which I think is fascinating, from the first Pride being a riot. And that gay men were moving police with a kick line, like joining arms, and that's how they got the police. There was the gay barrier. And just stuff like that is so beautiful and so empowering, that like, we're gonna scare the cops away with men in heels. You know, that's so beautiful. So like, the more immersed I got in the culture, and learning about drags, and I did different kinds of drag, and I performed behind as like a backup dancer for some drag queens. And just the more I got, the more I experienced, the more I'm like, okay, yeah, this is for me, this is not for me. Just the more information I could get, the more powerful I felt. Yeah, and also just being able to be around so many really diverse people in the LGBT community has really like opened my eyes to just so many different kinds of beautiful ways of expression. Like, I have friends that have been on RuPaul's Drag Race, and I have a friend that makes wigs for some of the queens, and it's just been so interesting to see some of these people come into that identity for themselves. And I don't know, the one thing that RuPaul says that I love so much, she's like, honey, you're born naked and the rest is drag. So I love waking up and be like, who do I want to be today? Do I want to wear a floral shirt? Do I want to wear like a lumberjack button down? You know, it's whatever makes you happy. I think finding happiness and people that can support that, you know, it's enriching for everyone involved. That's also what I love so much about Pride, is that it's all about like love, acceptance, self-expression, community. What a great party. Yeah, so that was kind of rambling. I'm also kind of nervous. I'm happy that I get to share with everyone. But it's just, well, I don't remember the last time I sat down and was like, so tell me about your gayness. You know, it's wonderful. I love being me, and I hope that everyone can feel the same thing.
Wonderful. Yeah, it is a little nerve-wracking, especially since we can't see the attendees. But yeah, it's take a deep breath, you know. Yeah, it's weird talking about our gayness, but it's just so important.
I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Oh yes, same. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, McKenna.
All right. So I also grew up in the Valley, and I grew up not a loner, But like I had my very small circle of friends. Didn't really like going outside that. I read a ton. I've always been a huge reader. And the first series that I can like really, really remember like getting obsessively into as a young teen was The City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, which is a funny place to start my journey as a queer person. But I was really into the character whose main story arc is discovering, like coming to terms with the fact that he's gay, starting to date this like immortal warlock, like this whole plot line of his whole relationship. And I was like, they're just such well-written characters. I love these characters so much. Skimming through the straight protagonists, they're just boring. I really love these characters. And so went through all of high school, no idea. Got to college, and all of a sudden, all my friends were on the spectrum of queerness somewhere, whether that was lesbian, gay, non-binary, transgender. And so I was like, I want to be a better ally to my friends. I'm going to take a queer theory class. And it just felt like a really, really important thing for me to do for my friends, naturally. And so I was reading all this queer theory, reading all these queer stories, and I had that moment where I was like, oh, all these pretty girls that I want to really be friends with, that's not what that is. I have crushes on these girls. There it is, light bulb. But I was dating a man at the time who I was in love with, and I thought, oh, I must be bi. That's cool. I'm bisexual. And I started coming out to all my friends and my family as bisexual. And then, a few months pass and I'm like, that label doesn't really feel like it sticks. Maybe I'm a lesbian. And my boyfriend and I broke up and I was like, I'm a lesbian now. And that lasted for about 6 months. And I was like, doesn't quite feel right either. And so I turned back to books and I was reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. Anything I could get my hands on. Fiction, nonfiction, books for teens, books for adults. And that's kind of where I first started learning about this label of queer. And it was the first time that I was like, this feels better. And it's stuck so far. It's been like, 8 years at this point. So I think we're riding it out safely at the moment. And when I moved back here after college, I almost immediately got a job at the Bookworm in Edwards. And because I grew up going there as a kid, and it was always this dream. I was like, I'm gonna work in a bookstore and I'm just gonna read books all the time and get paid for it. Not exactly what a bookseller is, but it is basically a professional reader. You have to read constantly. And so I was reading all these books and I kept coming back to all of these stories, these young adult LGBTQ stories. And I realized we didn't really have a dedicated section for those. They were all just kind of mixed into all the general books. And I thought, if I was a questioning kid or a questioning teen, would I feel comfortable going up to a total stranger at a desk and saying, where are your books about gay people? And the answer was definitely not. And so I pulled them all out. I talked to the owner of the store and she was all for it. And we created a little LGBTYA section. And it's kind of like my baby. I'm very protective and passionate about it. And I think one of the coolest things to see has been all of these other kids and adults alike coming together and seeing that and being like, this is so cool. And I get to have all these amazing conversations with them about finding themselves through these characters and through these books. Because I think the temptation for a lot of people when reading about queerness or anything, history or anything you want to learn about, is it has to be nonfiction and it has to be fact. And I think that one of the things that's so powerful is reading someone else's experience and someone else's story. And I think that's how you get that feeling of not being alone. And you kind of have those light bulb moments and you have that community, even if it's a fictional one. Even if you're in a place where you don't have a physical community with friends or family that support you, you can have these other characters that are like you. And I feel like for so many teens, and even me now, I'm like having a bad day and I'm like, time to flip through a queer romance novel, because I have the patience for queer tropes, but the second it's a straight couple, I can't focus. But you have a girl moving in with a princess in a Scottish boarding school and not knowing she's a princess, and then them falling madly in love, and I'm like there for it. I think that's like, it's so funny that you don't really realize, especially me not realizing I was queer when I was younger, how starved we are for those kind of stories, you know, to see ourselves in media, in literature, in movies, in other people. And so I'm like so happy that I'm in a place in my career where I can help other people find those stories and find people like them in the books that they're reading. And I think that's it. I think I rambled for long enough. Was that about 5 minutes?
That's good. That's good. Yes. Preach visibility. I love it. McKenna, do you have any books at the bookworm we should go check out?
Oh my God, yes.
Do you have a couple?
And if I'm there, please, anyone and everyone, just come talk to me and be like, give me a book, and I will talk to you for 45 minutes. I don't care.
I will be there tomorrow.
But my current obsessions, Felix Ever After is amazing. It's about a teen who has started transitioning from female to male and is determined to find love. And he is also kind of questioning, is he actually a boy? Did he get top surgery a little prematurely? Did he fight that battle too soon? And kind of looking at his identity and the people around him in his quest to find love. And it's amazing. It's by Kaysen Callender, who's a non-binary author. And it's just incredible. And then there's also Black Flamingo, which is told by Dean Atta, who is a British drag performer. And he has written this like novel in verse that's semi-autobiographical, but also fiction. And he has written this story about a young boy named Michael who's growing up mixed in London, not identifying with masculinity, not really identifying with femininity either, and identifying as a gay man, and then finding drag not necessarily as an outlet for, you know, identifying as female, but for expressing the femininity that he felt was like intrinsic in his life. And those are both just like beautiful. And yes, please, those are just two. I have like a million, so please come talk to me.
Everybody go to the bookworm.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll be there.
You're gonna have this whole panel here tomorrow.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
We'll get lunch.
Well, yeah, and we just the bookworm did a live of Uncle Bobby's wedding, children's book on Facebook on Saturday, and it is recorded, correct? If they go check your Facebook, yeah. So if you want to read your kids that book, the author did that, and Allie was a great moderator. So that is something definitely to check out. Okay, so attendees, this is your time. If you have any questions, jump into the Q&A and write those in, and then we'll get started here on the Q&A here quick.
There are questions in the Q&A.
There are two, I believe.
Awesome. Okay, so I have the first one. So how can I, as an educator, support the journey of LGBTQ students? So Brittany did a little bit of response, but do you want to talk about that, Brittany?
Yeah, so like the best way to kind of support students, coming from someone who was a teacher before they went to work on Disney cruise ships for a while, is really just kind of provide that safe environment for your students. Now, depending on the age level of the students, especially I would start at middle school, have an open conversation the very first day of the school. It should really be kind of part of your orientation to the class that, hey, these are things that we don't accept. These are, you know, love is love. You know, you don't have to teach about sexuality in general to teach that discriminating against sexuality or gender identity is wrong. So, and just, you know, basically set a guideline, and then also understand how to recognize you know, that language that might be negative or impactful to someone who you may see a student that go, you know, they may have some LGBT tendencies, but that student hasn't figured their own self out yet. Well, recognize the language that's going to hurt that student from recognizing who they are, and then being able to correct that as well. So like that way, you know, and in a proper way. So like you don't want to call out that situation in the classroom, because now you put that student who's having questionable thoughts at a focal point, and they don't want that. They just want the abuse to stop. So, you know, make it a point to recognize that, and then pull them aside and understand how we can correct that behavior, because that's something that, and explain to those people how that behavior can be detrimental to not just, you know, the child well-being, but life in general. So yeah, that's really, I kind of typed way less than that, but that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Wonderful. Thank you. Alex?
For me, in school, I think it was a little hard to talk to the teachers. A few of them, it was kind of easy to, but it was difficult because I didn't really trust any of them. I trusted them to the point where I knew I could tell them, but I didn't trust them enough for me to want to tell them. And that's kind of difficult to get kids to trust teachers, I think, with the whole LGBTQ and coming out thing. For some teachers, it's easier. For some teachers, it's a little bit harder. I know that I probably would have been a lot, I think, more comfortable in school if in classes like gym or in math class or whatever, when we had to divide the class, it would always be boy and girl. And I think for me, that put me under just like a spotlight, because if I left and went to the boys section, everyone would ask questions and everyone would want to know, and there'd always be comments and all of that. And if I went to the girls' side, I wouldn't feel right there. I'd be misplaced. I don't know. It just didn't feel right. And I think it would have been a lot easier if it was just numbering, or this color on your shirt, or glasses and non-glasses wear, or birthdays, or anything like that, popsicle sticks even. There were so many different ways of organizing us. I think that just kind of put a lot of pressure on me, and it probably put a lot of pressure on some of the other students who were questioning themselves, if they were. Yeah, I think that was a big issue for me in school.
McKenna, did you want to go?
You can go first.
Okay. I'm starting college soon. I'm out of high school, but I would like to add some things from my experience in high school. I had one openly queer teacher at the time. She wasn't my teacher, but she was like a teacher in the building, and had like, you know, like a mentor for me a little bit. But I always think about when educators ask like what they can do, I always think about my science teacher. I had her in like 3 different years of school. I was at VMS, so like same teachers throughout middle school and high school. And she was my science teacher. She taught me anatomy my senior year. And she made a really, like, I think I missed this day, but I know she made the whole day out of like, here we're starting like our sex ed unit, but like here's the difference between gender and sex, and here's like gender identities and like gender expression and sexual identity versus like, you know, like biology. And I think like that just made me feel so more comfortable. And I was already out at school at that point, but like it just made me feel like, wow, like people are like really looking and seeing, like being like, I see you. And even if there weren't any out people, it's like a, hey, you're safe in this classroom. So I think, I mean, you know, different teachers do different things, but like making an effort to like highlight queer stories. If you're a history teacher, talk about Stonewall. If you're an English teacher, choose a book with queer characters in it. you know, there's different ways depending on subjects to, I don't know what math would be, you'd have to figure that out, but like different ways to include queer stories in curriculums, just in discussions, anything that makes people feel recognized.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, I was going to say something a little similar, which is just incorporate it into your classroom, like wherever you can. I don't think that you need to necessarily know that students in your room are queer or gender nonconforming or anything. I think that it's normalizing it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not treating it as something bad. It's not treating it as something that you can't talk about. You know, and just that goes into creating that safe space that Brittany was talking about. Like, you know, have books with queer characters in your classroom library. Teach them about their own history. You know, I think so much of my life as an adult queer woman has been filling in the gaps of my own history that I never even knew about. You know, like doing my own research and seeking out all these things. And it's fine because the resources are out there, but it would have like changed my entire life, and I would probably have known so much sooner if I can see those things. Because I think especially in a valley this small and this enclosed, you know, it's hard to, you don't really see these people, you know, which is why I was so excited to do this. But like, you don't really necessarily see, you know, the community all the time. And so I think as, you know, a child, if you start just hearing about these things, you hear about Stonewall, you learn about the passing of, you know, marriage equality, you learn about all these different things and you talk about them in your classroom. I think that's the biggest thing you can do, because not only are you, you know, making sure that the possibly queer children in your classroom feel safe, you're also widening the worldview of your cisgendered heterosexual students as well, which I think is also so important in creating a safe future for all of your students, no matter how they identify.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too about like even for like not queer kids of like it says like, hey, in this classroom I accept queer people, and yeah, it exposes them to other ideas. Because like, you know, I think a lot of the people on this panel can probably relate. Like, queer people tend to seek out other queer people. Like, my friend group encapsulated all the queer people in my grade.
We travel in herds.
Yeah. So like, and you know, so we learn a lot from each other, but then straight people don't. So if you are a teacher, you know, that's your job. You know, expose this kids that may not be looking for this information to information that they should know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is. And those safe space stickers that teachers have, those are huge to show students that they are safe people, a safe person to go to. We're short on amount of time, so let's move on to the next question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One more thing on that. So we can't affect change in the future without education. So it starts with educators. So it's important to remember that we didn't get to anywhere we are in the last 51 years without people learning things. So that's where you as an educator become important. You have to help teach them at a younger age so that when they get older, it becomes easier for us to fight the fights that we're fighting. That's a quick point, sorry.
Very, very good point. So we did have a question about if you had a mentor or a peer that helped you come out. I thought I'd like to ask this question as well as, do you guys have any advice for people that are unsure of their sexual orientation or where they fit on the LGBTQ spectrum, and what advice you'd give them about either talking to their parents or helping them? Melanie, you want to go?
So I like I said, I mentioned my teacher that was queer, and like she kind of helped me feel more comfortable at school and be like, okay, like she's existing here as an openly queer person, I can do that too then. So that was nice. But also I think it was like McKenna said, like we're kind of in a bubble here. There's not a lot of like queer people. Like there were only 1, 2 other people, openly queer people in my grade. I mean, granted, my grade was small, but still. So a lot of like my mentors were not necessarily like friends or family or like people I actually really knew, but it was more like a YouTube, internet, like people that are like, you know, just living authentically. And I'm like, oh, like that it's like made, what's the word? Encouraged me to kind of be more comfortable with myself. And the other thing is, I would love to like give any kids advice. Oh my God, I feel like parent to the youth. Here I am, your older queer person, ready to help. Just like, yeah, don't be, I mean, I know a bunch of people have said this already, like, don't be afraid to experiment. Try some things out. Try, if you're like a girl questioning like gender identity, try some men's pants out. The pockets are better and they're more comfortable. And also it might make you feel better. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like, you know, things, hair grows back, clothes can be swapped, trade, you know, whatever. It's, a lot of things are very easy to experiment with. So might as well take the leap and do it.
Definitely.
Yeah, for me, I had I think the biggest people in my life who really helped me, I think, with my journey, who weren't like my family members, were probably the school therapists, because they were people I could go to, and I knew they weren't gonna, you know, tell everyone, because and I trusted them, and they were there when I came out with my mom and dad, both times, so one of them, but so yeah, I think that was important for me personally. Yeah, I think having that sort of safe environment, people you can trust,
That's awesome.
is really important for me.
Yes. Orlando, Jonathan, or Allie, I haven't heard from you guys in a while. Yeah, you wanna?
Yeah, I think for me it was my friends. I had friends that were further ahead than I was, as far as coming out to my parents and experiencing, that whole world. So it was nice to have a specific friend. His name is Jorge. Kind of look up to him, kind of follow him. Like, God here, God there, do this, do that. And so it was nice to have someone to look up to. And to kind of go through it first before I did, so I kind of knew what was happening. So I always think about him, So he was sort of my mentor in that sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
Orlando had a very similar story. It's funny, I remember almost the exact moment I was sitting in my room, and I realized that I was queer, and like, this will relate if I backtrack a little bit. So I graduated college, and I started working at the Bookworm like a week later. And actually, McKenna was working there at the same time, and she had made that LGBTQ section that she was talking about. And I was spinning the spinner, and I saw this rainbow spine, and I pulled it out, and I took it to her, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I've always wanted to read this book." And she said, "You know what? I have a copy. I'll let you borrow it." And so I read it, and the protagonist is this fat lesbian, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's me. That's my life." And I vividly remember that. And ever since then, it's been like 2 years now since I started this whole coming out journey. And McKenna and I are best friends. We hang out all the time, and I like to call her my elder queer mentor, I guess. She's not that much older than me, but she's like been through it before I had. And like Orlando was saying, it's so awesome to have this person that you can, talk to, and oh my gosh, how do I do this? And they're like, "Don't worry, honey, I already did it." So yeah, totally. I think, back to, we flock together, we herd together. It's totally true. It's so important. So I'd say if you're, thinking about your gender identity, you're questioning your sexuality, I think the first thing I would do is read you don't like to read, check out YouTube. There are so many awesome YouTubers who are having these totally great conversations with each other. Watch movies, watch TV, and yeah, I'd say, yeah.
Going to art school in the same way. Well, I went to theater camp in high school, and the senior in high school guys, this was in upstate New York, they like saw me immediately and they were like, come with us, which was great, and it was really fun, and just getting exposed to that at an early age was awesome. But going to art college was like here you just learning about everything at the same time. I was like, this is awesome. But I had a best friend there who's a short, stocky, light-skinned gay black boy, Chris Ralph, my favorite person on the planet. I miss him so much. But we were just kind of like doing it together, like, okay, this is really exciting. Let's see what this is about. Maybe not for us. Okay, here we're going to go over here, and like just experiencing different parts of the culture and doing it together, and like just figuring out like what feels good, what doesn't, and just as long as you're like having a good old time safely, you know, like just operate out of love.
Yeah.
And I think the representation thing Allie talked about is so important. I think, McKenna, you said this too, like every one of us like probably remembers like the first time we saw someone like us represented in like a TV show or movie or book. I was reading, it wasn't Percy Jackson, but it was Trials of Apollo, Rick Riordan. And like these two gay characters were a couple. I like ran a lap around the house, and I don't run. So I was like, oh my God, there's gay people. A gay couple in the story. And then there was like a gender fluid character, and I was like, oh my God, I still love those books. Oh my gosh. Yes, Percy Jackson. Make your kids read Percy Jackson.
Oh my God, Rick Riordan is just like, shout out to Rick
The
Riordan
king.
for like tricking people into reading a fun series about Greek mythology and then being like, surprise, all your faves are queer. They're just like you, see?
Boom.
Just top notch.
And representing children as well.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah.
I just have one quick thing that I want to jump in before we run out of time. Speaking of education and representation and everything, I am now teaching at the More to Dance studio in Eagle. And on, I believe it's February, oh my gosh, August 7th, I'll be posting it online. I'm doing a voguing class. We're calling it SAS class, and I'm addressing voguing that came out of Harlem from men of color in the time that they were being oppressed. And so we're going to do a sassy kind of class, and all the proceeds are going to go to an LGBT charity. So I'll be on Facebook. Check it out. A little education, a little sass, throw a little shade.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, but I think the one thing that I would give advice to is peer mentors are so important. Like everyone on this panel has already said, mine was like my best friend in college, Rachel, who is like kind of this like intimidating in like the best way, because she's like 5'0", but she will like beat you up. And like I felt so safe with her all the time, no matter where we were. She was in the Navy, couldn't swim. Just like really an amazing person. I love her to death. But she was like, she'd been out since she was 13. She had all these answers. She knew everything. And I think that that's such an important relationship to cultivate. And I think that it's like, it's so empowering to just like trip upon these people. And I think you kind of do without even realizing it. But just finding that one person, even if it's just one person who you trust enough to talk to about these things and to ask them questions and to just engage with them constantly about all this stuff that's going on inside your head, because when it's in your head, it's really big and scary. And I think that's the number one thing is you're like, oh gosh, what does this mean? And if you have someone to even just act as a sounding board, even if they don't identify as queer, but finding that one person that you can really talk to about what's happening, I think is so powerful. And I think that one thing that's always kind of been an interesting sticking point for me is, since I didn't figure it out until a little bit later in life, I was like, but am I really though? Like, am I? I'm not sure, because I feel like I would have known sooner. And like, I think it's so important to realize that no matter when you figure these things out about yourself, or how many times you relabel yourself, or how many times you switch up your identity or experiment with something, like that is 100% valid, and it doesn't invalidate what you previously identified as. Like I think of my time as identifying as both bisexual and as strictly lesbian have completely helped to form who I am today. And so I think that that's also important, is that not only is experimentation not physically permanent most of the time, as most of the panelists have said, but like coming out is a process, and you're gonna have to do it your entire life. Every time you walk into a new friend group, every time you start a new job, you know, like you're gonna have to do these things constantly. And so there's no time when you can't come out as something new. And so looking at it from that perspective and not getting stuck, I think, is also so important to being mentally healthy, in terms of identity as well.
Yeah, before we go, I want to talk about homophobia and transphobia, because it can look like so many different things. It's not always just, ew, you're gay, I hate you. There's terms used all the time can be homophobic, and to some people who don't understand, it doesn't sound like it. So yeah, I wanted to go over that real quick if we have enough time. Just like, yeah. So I think with pronouns, people often say, when I first started coming out, I said, I identify as he, him, and they responded with, I identify as, and then they made a joke. And and it's not a joke, it's real, and that's how it is, and it's not something to be joked about. And I think I don't know if they knew they were being homophobic or transphobic, but they were, and I think that kind of phrasing is definitely
Person's like, hey, like that kind of rubs me the wrong way, and like here's why. Listen to them.
Yeah, I agree. Don't just
like
blow it off.
Nothing off the top. I mean, that's like a good thing to think of for everything: sexism, racism, homophobia.
Yeah.
Just listen to people if they of a marginalized group. If they're like, hey, this thing like really kind of hurts, listen.
Yeah, and everyone's valid. Everyone's valid. Every identity orientation is valid. And again, all you have to do is try to understand. That's all it is about. But it's so important to be visible, to be that ally for these people. If you're an educator, if you're a parent, a friend, be that support system that we all needed and we received. So yes, be as visible, be as supportive as you can. I think that we probably should wrap up here. I want to thank the panelists. You guys have been awesome. Thank you for everyone for staying a little bit later. This was an incredible opportunity, and I hope you learned some stuff from it, and hopefully catch us next time in person. Okay, awesome.
All right, thank you everyone.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.